Hello everyone, Jake, your resident content cowboy here. Yeehaw! In this video, I'm going to show you the best emblem setups. That's right, the verified best emblem setups, verified by the Math Cord and the people over at UniteDB for every Pokemon inside the game. Not only am I going to show you the best emblem setup for every single Pokemon, I'm also going to myth bust a few of the not so good emblem setups that you may see floating around the community. That's right, we're gonna do some myth busting. So come along with me, friends. I'll have timestamps for every single Pokemon in this video, as well as some important moments of myth busting, but I would recommend watching the whole thing so you get a good idea as to why the best thing is the best thing. All right, yeehaw, onto the video. So let's start talking about a basic special attack build. Here are two builds that you could see for special attackers here. The one on the left gives you slightly more special attack, and the one on the right is giving you slightly more effective HP. Both is giving you 6 green, 7 black, 2 white, while the build on the right is not giving you the 2 blue. As a general rule, the defenses blue and purple that you get on the left build, they're actually not that beneficial overall. Defense is just a really tricky stat inside Pokemon Unite, and there's more that we could talk about with that, but in general, defenses aren't that big. HP, however, is pretty solid. So when you look at these two, first off, you could say that both of them are pretty dang good, and the question is, which build is better? Would you rather have the little extra special attack, the build on our left, or would you rather have more HP, the build on our right? And the Math Cord consensus is take the build on the right. The thought with this build here is that the little extra special attack doesn't actually affect all of your moves as much as you would like, because there are multiple values that go into whether or not a move is going to do a ton of damage. There is a base amount of damage, there's a slider based on level, and then finally there's your special attack modifier. So this build that you're looking at right here does not give you as much flat special attack, but it gives you more HP. HP effectively here is like an additional cooldown for a move. If you can survive long enough to use another move because you have more HP, then it is without question going to be a stronger build. Effective HP essentially looking like cooldown inside of this build. So let's talk about all of the special attackers that can take advantage of what we are looking at right here, and there are a ton of them. Let's start with everybody's favorite, Cramorant. Cramorant loves this build, whether you're going for the Air Slash and Dive build or you're going Surf Hurricane. Cram takes great advantage of this. Extra special attack, extra cooldown, a little extra health. Thumbs up for Cram. Delphox. Unsurprisingly, Delphox loves cooldowns, loves special attack. This build is perfect for that Pokemon, whether you're going Fire Spin or you're going Flame Charge, which you probably should be going Flame Charge, but all of Delphox loves this. Espeon wants this build, whether it's going Stored Power or it's using Psyshock. Espeon takes advantage of all of this inside of its kit. Without question, run this on Espy. No surprise, if Delphox is taking huge advantage of this, then Gardevoir probably can too, right? Extra cooldowns, extra damage, little extra health, great for Guardy. Gengar is an interesting one. While it's a speedster and it's a little different from some of the Pokemon we've talked about so far, it's a special attacker and it wants all this stuff. Extra cooldowns, extra damage, gimme, gimme, gimme. This is for Gengar. Whether you're using Hex or you're using the Dream Eater build, both work great with this. Mew absolutely wants this build. Extra damage, extra cooldowns, little extra health. Mew is a caster, and it's using its abilities all the time. This is a great setup for Mew. Pikachu. Of course, Pikachu, all it does is use moves, whether it's Electro Ball and Volt Tackle or it's Thunderbolt. However you're setting up your Pikachu, Pikachu is going to take great advantage of what we're looking at right here. Our next Pokemon that could use this is Venusaur, and that's actually pretty interesting because Venusaur is a little different from some of the ones we looked at, but whether you're up in their face with Giga Drain and Petal Dance or you're firing off your solar beams, this is the setup you want to go with. Extra damage, little extra tankiness, which is nice for that Giga Dance build, and then we also have the cooldown, which is pretty amazing for it. Venusaur loves this build. Blissey is an interesting one. Blissey, one of the supporters in the game that actually takes advantage of this. We have another supporter that we'll talk about here in a minute as well. A few, actually, that are special attack based, but Blissey loves this. A lot of it is the cooldown. Blissey wants to get those eggs back as quickly as possible, be able to use all its moves, whether it's, the egg build, whether it's the safeguard build. Blissey wants those cooldowns. Now this next Pokemon, Clefable here, actually can use this set and one other. This set is ideal for the Moonlight build, just so you can have that healing up as often as possible. You're gonna want this on Clefable. But if you're playing Draining Kiss, I'm going to move you over to our build that's actually more set up for our special attacker tanks. Let's take a look. Here is the build that you would like to run if you're going Draining Kiss Clefable. So let's take a look at the big differences here. Is you're still getting the 6 green, you're no longer getting the 7 black, instead you're getting 6 white. So this is going to take advantage of all of those Pokemon that get a ton of HP. Clefable being one of them, it gets a lot of it, and this just makes you tankier for that Draining Kiss build. Let's talk about other Pokemon that could actually take huge advantage of this. Slowbro. When you're thinking about tanky special attackers, Slowbro probably instantly comes to mind. One of the tankiest Pokemon inside the game, and this just helps it get even thicker and stronger so it can do its job in fights, which is live forever. Blastoise is another Pokemon that actually takes huge advantage of this. Another very tanky Pokemon, a ton of defenses, a ton of health, and this also gives it some special attack. Blastoise loves this setup. Mr. Mime, another super tanky Pokemon that could use a little extra special attack damage, but a ton of HP. I personally also run a cooldown build on Mime, but this is the official Math Cord recommendation for Mr. Mime. Wigglytuff. I mean, of course, you need to be more wiggly and more tough. How could you possibly be more wiggly and more tough than this build? The answer is you can't. You simply can't be more wiggly and you can't be more tough. Here's a cool one that might surprise you. Sylveon actually does really, really well with this. Sylveon is a shockingly tanky Pokemon for it being an attacker. It's this weird outlier inside the attacker category, and it actually works really well with this build. This next Pokemon actually has 2 ways that you can run it, and we're gonna lead into another build here in just one sec from it, and that is Hoopa. You can definitely run Hoopa this way. Hoopa is surprisingly tanky, and you are able to get a lot out of the extra special attack as well. But Hoopa actually really enjoys this unless you're doing something a little different with Hoopa, which we'll talk about right now. This is what you would want to run on Hoopa if you're going for sort of an auto attack focus build, which is actually how I love to play Hoopa. So if you're running a Muscle Band, Rapid Fire Scarf, and EXP Share, something like that on Hoopa, you're going to want to use this build right here. The 7 red will actually give you faster attack with this build. Red is one of the weirdest emblem setups in Pokemon Unite. There are only a few Pokemon that take advantage of it well. Hoopa using that setup and these emblems actually does work pretty well. Another Pokemon actually takes advantage of this setup that we're looking at right here. And that Pokemon is Eldegoss. Eldegoss with the same items, Muscle, Rapid Fire Scarf, and something like EXP Share, or perhaps you're running Focus Band or something like that. But if you're running those 2 attack speed items, you can run this 7 red build and get extra attacks out of it. There are only, again, a few Pokemon that can take advantage of it, but Elde is one of them. However, there is another Eldegoss build that I'd like to show you. Eldegoss could also be running the classic special attack build that we looked at a little bit earlier. This gives you better cooldowns, a little extra special attack, a little extra health. So if you're not focused into the auto attack realm, this is what you would want to run on Eldegoss. Now let's talk about another Pokemon that has 2 setups here that are kind of interesting. First, Alolan Ninetales can use this setup very well if you're going the Blizzard Avalanche build. So that's more of the Mage Ninetales, and it's set up around those 2 moves, comboing them together, doing a lot of special attack damage, and wanting your cooldowns to be up very fast. There is another build, and that is the Aurora Veil Dazzling Gleam build. Let me show you what that emblem setup would look like. Here is the setup if you are using that Aurora Veil Dazzling Gleam build. So you're still using 7 red. Obviously, that build is all about auto attacking. You're actually able to get more out of it if you're using this build. You also have 2 green, you have 4 white inside this, and a little extra special attack because you are doing some special attack damage with this Pokemon. There is also a build that you can run with Alolan Ninetales for critical hits, but it is not one of the MathGord official recommended builds.
Official MathGord recommended builds.
Now let's talk about a Pokemon that's pretty weird, and that's Glaceon. Glaceon has had a lot of different emblem setups for a while here. At one point, there were 3 different emblem setups for the Icicle Spear build, but we've kind of simplified that, and here's what we're looking at. If you're running Icy Wind, you're going to want to use this. Very similar to some of the builds we were looking at earlier, but you're not losing any critical hit because Glaceon does have critical hit. Now, this is what you would want to be running if you were focusing on the Icicle Spear build. It's interesting, but you do need 2 different setups here, and in fact, there used to be multiple setups for Glaceon on Icicle Spear depending on how you wanted your Icicle Spears to activate. Basically, the way this works right now is you would run Glaceon with an Energy Amp, Rapid Fire Scarf, and Wise Glasses, also with an X attack. So depending on whether your Rapid Fire Scarf is active or not, that depends on how many spears you could get into your combo and at what level you could get them at. There's a lot to be said here, and it's kind of confusing to hear some of it, so why don't I show you a little bit of this inside a game just so you understand what I'm talking about. With this setup, what you can get at level 6 with Glaceon is the Icicle Spear Ice Shard combo, where you get 4 Ice Shards into a 10 spear combo, right back into an 8 spear setup combo. This happens with your Rapid Fire Scarf, and X attack actually helps you bridge that gap through these moves. Let me show you what this looks like. Ice Shard, you get your Ice Shard set up, you fire your Ice Shard, you throw your last 2 right at the end, your X attack gets it right back, and there you go. 8 into 8 into 8 into 10 into 8 into 10 into, you get it. A lot of Icicle Spears are able to be thrown, and if your Rapid Fire Scarf activates, boom, you've got 8 more right away. So this is the combo you're looking to do with Glaceon. You can do it as early as level 6 with this setup. Now, if you don't like running X attack, you'll also find that you can do this combo once you gain a few more levels. You're actually able to achieve this combo without X attack at level 7. It's just a little bit harder, and you definitely want your Rapid Fire Scarf activated to make sure that you're able to get it there. But you can get it without it. It's just really, really close, as you saw right there. Really, really close. And then once you hit level 10, you're actually able to set up a pretty cool combo here where you can use your 10 Icicle Spears right into another 10 Icicle Spears pretty fast. So yeah, it's a really great setup for this Pokemon. Again, you're going to want those boost emblems, and you're going to want a Rapid Fire Scarf to make this work. I know Glaceon was kind of a weird one, but I thought it would be good to sort of show you what that looked like inside of the practice area. So there you have it, the best emblem build for every special attacker in Pokemon Unite. And you know, we do have Comfey coming to the game very, very soon, and even though we don't know for sure, and I don't know what the MathGord would recommend, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say having cooldowns and special attack is probably gonna be the way to go with that Pokemon, and early I would recommend this right here for Comfey. And I promised we were gonna do some myth busting, so here we go. Here we go. We're going to myth bust a common special attack build that we see out there that is actually not ideal. Oh, you're gonna myth bust? I thought you said missed butts. Jake6, you thought I had a segment dedicated to misting butts during this? Yes, and I was honestly looking forward to it. Well, this is not that. This is myth busting. No. This is not that. This is butt misting. Okay, interesting. Well, this is not that. This is butt misting. Myth busting. Right here is a special attack build that you may have seen before. This gives you 6 green, 2 blue, 2 white, and 4 purple, and it also gives you 27 special attack. And I know this build has been recommended a little bit inside of the community, but the math cord wants you to know that this build is not ideal. We're gonna bust this mist. Mist this butt? What are we doing? Myth busting. So why is it not as good? There you go. Just, you know, read all the words and math. They did the math and there are the words. I'm not saying I don't understand it. It's just, it's all right there. If you would like to check the math on this, I will have a link to this document, but let's basically talk about what's happening here. Inside of a move, you have 3 values that are making up your damage. Your base value damage, a slider based on your level, and then your special attack. And the truth is, the extra special attack you get here, the 27 extra special attack, really doesn't make up for the fact that you are not getting the cooldown from our other build right here. If you take a look at this here, an average % damage increase between levels 0 through 4, 5 through 8, 9 through 12, and 13 plus are looked at right here by the math cord. And the basic thought is cooldown always is going to increase your damage by the division of the actual cooldown. So if we look at our moves early, let's say we're looking at Gengar, which is what they're looking at here. A level 5 Gengar with choice specs, wise glasses, and a shell bell with this emblem set. You're seeing early a very, very slight damage increase. About 5% damage increase when you are using these special attack emblems. However, as the match goes on, specifically, you are getting a ton of damage decrease because you are not getting the cooldown that you would effectively get with this build. As you can see, as you continue to level up, your damage increase is bigger and bigger and bigger because you're able to cast your moves more. That is the basic idea as to why the extra special attack that you get from that build right there is not as good as the cooldown that you actually get from this setup. Again, I will have a link to all of this in the description if you would like to read more about it. And again, the big thought here is while you get a small damage increase at level 5 and an even smaller damage increase at level 9, the entire time you're missing out on all of the benefits from cooldown reduction, not to mention the fact that this gives you HP, whereas the other build actually takes away 50 HP. So basically, you really just don't get enough off of extra special attack. A lot of special attackers unfortunately fall into this area where that extra special attack is just not enough to make up for the fact that you lose so much from the cooldown. So while this build is fun, it's just kind of cheesy and it's actually not as good.
Myth busted.
Now let's talk about the best emblem sets for every attacker in Pokemon Unite, and yes, we will be busting some myths. Dang it. Let's start by talking about this setup right here. This is going to be used for a lot of our attackers and assassin type Pokemon. We've got 6 brown, 4 white, 2 purple, 2 blue, 200 extra HP, 11.6 attack. You'll notice that there is a silver Nidoking on there. The reason that this is on there at silver is because it gives you 1.6 attack, and that will actually round up. That's the only emblem that you would want on here, specifically in silver on purpose. All right, let's talk about every attacker that this is good for. Absol makes great use of this setup, and I know what you're thinking. What about critical hit? We will talk about critical hit a little later, but Absol does very well with this setup. Cinderace does very, very well with this setup as well. Again, you just get a ton of extra damage, you get the extra 11 attack, and you get the 6 brown plus the extra HP. Decidueye, another Pokemon that does very, very well with this setup. Where is the crit, you ask? We will get to it. Dodrio does very well with this setup. A lot of times you would think you could add some move speed to Dodrio, but you get a lot with that Pokemon already, and this just adds to its damage. Dragonite, pretty easy one, 6 brown, extra health, very, very good for Dragonite, no matter what build you play on it. Maybe you would want some more tankiness if you were outraged, but still, Dragonite. Dragapult also does very, very well with this setup. Auto attacker doing a lot of damage. You'll notice that all the auto attackers do well with this setup. Let's talk about another auto attacker then, shall we? Duraludon actually does very, very well with this. There's another emblem build that Duraludon can kind of use, and again, we'll get to critical hit, but this is a very solid setup for the big shiny refrigerator. Did you know that I was told not to call it that on broadcast? True story. Greninja also does very, very well with the setup you're looking at right now. Very good for the ninja. Lucario, interestingly enough, even though you're up in the mix a lot, Lucario benefits a lot from extra attack, and this build is excellent for Lucario. Sableye. Now this is interesting. I want to talk more about Sableye, and I know that this is a solid setup for Sableye. It gives you a lot of damage, and this is the Math Cord endorsed build for Sableye. I will later show you a build that I've seen a lot of people running on Sableye. I can't say if it's better or not necessarily. This is what is recommended by the best of the best, but there is another Sableye build I will talk to you about. Talonflame. Talonflame wants to do a lot of damage. Get in there, do as much damage as possible, and hopefully get out. We'll see if it ends up doing that. And this is a great setup for Talon to do that. If you want the extra move speed on Talon, just run a Float Stone. You don't need something like 7 yellow. Zeraora also does very, very well with this setup. You want the extra attack, you want to be able to delete things and do a ton of damage, and this is the setup for that. And how could we talk about Zeraora if we're not talking about Zoroark? Zoroark does very well with this setup. Also, lots of extra damage. Now, let's talk about the next build that's really popular for attack-based Pokemon, and that is this brawling, tanky, white and brown setup right here. You're getting 300 HP, you're getting 8 attack, and you're really only losing small amounts of defenses and special attack, which is completely irrelevant for your Pokemon right here. All gold is what you're looking at, but of course, do as best you can to sort of make these combinations work right here. So there are a few Pokemon that we've talked about already that could actually make pretty good use of it. Dragonite could actually do pretty well with this setup, and we've already shown a Dragonite build, but this is a solid one for it as well. Zeraora could do well with something like this. Sableye could do well with something like this. Dodrio could as well. This is pretty similar to the other. It's just its focus is more on health than it is on attack. So there are a lot of Pokemon that are specifically really suited for this one as opposed to the other. However, let's go through all of them right now. Aegislash. Aegislash is great with this setup. We'll talk a little bit about Crit Aegislash a little later, but right now Aegislash is a super solid Pokemon for this setup. A lot of extra health and tankiness. Azumarill. Azumarill is great with this setup. You can use the other one, but this is a solid setup for Azumarill. Just a lot of extra health, and you're still getting a ton of attack with this build. Buzzy Boy. Oh, Buzzwole. Buzzwole works out really well with this setup right here. Charizard. Charizard is also another great option for this setup. Charizard, you know, a lot of the all-rounders are tankier than you would look at for, you know, some of your auto attackers and things like that, and that's why they take extra advantage of this. They're going to be up in the mix more, so the HP helps them a lot. Crustle. Tanky Crustle. However, Crit Crustle is a thing, and we'll talk about crits in a bit. Garchomp could do pretty well with this setup right here. It's up in the mix and fighting a lot, and there is also a critical hit setup for Garchomp that I personally prefer. I think critical hit Garchomp's amazing. Greedent, kind of a no-brainer right here. You can use other emblems on Greedent like yellow or something like that, but you honestly don't even need it. You can just make Greedent tankier. Machampion does very well with this setup right here. You don't need the extra attack from Brown, however you could run it, and of course if you're focusing on critical hits, there is an option there for Machamp, but you probably don't actually need that extra critical hit percent. Mamoswine. Absolutely, Mamoswine will crush with this setup. Put it on Mamo, thank me later. The Math Cord recommends this for both Scizor and Scyther, so they're saying that this setup works really well for both of those Pokemon. Snorlax. I mean, are you surprised? this is a great setup for Snorlax. Big and tanky. Speaking of big and tanky, I mean, when you're talking tree, you want a lot of health. Get a lot of health on that tree with a little extra attack. This is great for Trevenant. Zarina, oh Zarina. I could see you wanting to lean into the brown setup instead of this white setup here, but Zarina is fighting so much. This extra health can help a lot. Again, it's always something to think about. If you're able to survive long enough, especially with Zarina, to use another move, that is just so valuable. T-Tar, you want Tyranitar to be very tanky, especially given how Tyranitar's passive works. Get a focus band on Tyranitar, have that passive up, get it a lot of health. Yes, please. This is also the setup they have for Urshifu. I don't have it split between single strike and rapid strike, but in general, rapid strike is just kind of whatever right now. However, it's a build based around health and resets and stuff like that, so this would ostensibly work for both, I would assume. But this is their recommendation for Urshifu. Now, in a minute here, we're going to talk about critical hit, but I think it's time to do a little
myth busting.
It's time to talk about it and bust a little myth right here. We've got everyone's favorite on the left, the 666 build. I love the 666 build. You love the 666 build. It's so fun to see 6 defense, 6 special defense, and 6 brown against the Math Cord recommended 2 blue, 6 white, 4 brown here. So the basic idea is this. While this build is pretty, and there's no question that the 666 build is pretty, I was so stoked when I got it. The truth is, defenses in Pokemon Unite are almost never preferable to extra health, and there's a good reason. One of the biggest reasons is you're always getting hit unless it's true damage, where defenses mean nothing, even worse, but you're always getting hit with one of 2 types of damage, either special attack or attack. So even if you pump all of your defenses very high or all of your special defenses very high, only one of those numbers is helping you at any given time. I recognize this build gives a little to both, but the other build just giving you more HP and more attack to boot, by the way, but just giving you more HP effectively makes it so that anytime you're getting hit, you're actually benefiting more from this 6 white build than you are the others. There's a long conversation to be had about defenses in Pokemon Unite, but basically the higher they go, almost the worse they perform as it continues to get higher and higher and higher. There's more information about this on Unite DB, and I don't think I'm going to explain it super well and concise inside of this video right now. But the basic idea is defenses are not so great in Pokemon Unite, and HP is far and away much better. I understand this build looks pretty, and I get it. It looks pretty. It's just simply not as good. The HP is so much better, and as I mentioned before, if you're taking true damage, these defenses, they just mean absolutely nothing at all. And you lose some attack. Come on. Sadly, and I love the build,
Myth busted.
Now, before we move on to critical hit, I thought it would be a good idea just to go over the idea, since we're talking so much about extra HP, comparing these 2 builds right here. This is sort of a full HP build that you're seeing on the left, and then you're seeing the build that we've been recommending for a ton of Pokemon. The Math Cord has been recommending for a ton of Pokemon, more specifically here on the right. So the big difference here is you actually are getting more HP with the build on the left, even though your defenses are going down, possibly down enough to where the HP doesn't make that big of a difference, but you're also losing a ton of attack right here. So while the HP is very good, you actually lose some of your effectiveness because you're not able to secure, get last hits and things like this. The build here on our right, this build closest to me, is definitely the one that the Math Cord recommends, and I get it. You of course want to be tanky, but you don't want to give up too much of your combat effectiveness as well. So that is why this full HP build is not recommended by the Math Cord. Basically, if you can out-secure someone, if you can get more last hits, if you can fight a little bit better with the build on the right, you'll be able to gain more experience, and through gaining more experience and things like that, you will be able to outpace someone who is only focused on HP. Now let's talk about critical hits. We're taking a look at a critical hit setup right here, and we have some options for different emblems that you can slot in. The basic idea that the Math Cord wants to get across with critical hit is, while critical hit is super fun, if you just put all of your effort into critical hit and you get your 6% extra chance, you're actually losing out on an attack bonus. Essentially, if you're using critical hit, the idea is that you're doing more damage, obviously. So to really make that work, you need to make sure that this set is set up with 6 brown at the same time. Meaning, you're not going to be able to run a full 6% critical hit build and do that at the same time, because you're going to need a couple brown emblems that don't provide critical hit. Therefore, you've got what we're looking at right here. This 8 out of 10 critical hit where you're getting some white and some brown, and then you've got 2 slots that are left over. You could put in some white emblems to create sort of a 6 white setup with 4 brown, or a couple of brown emblems to create a 6 brown setup with 4 white. And I'm going to talk to you about the Pokemon that they recommend critical hits for. The thought is, critical hits are unpredictable, so if you're looking for a predictable set of damage that you can reliably count on, critical hits are not it. Sometimes they might work better than another build because you get very lucky, but that doesn't mean it is the optimal choice. However, there are some Pokemon that the Math Cord recommends that you can run critical hit on, and it doesn't seem to be too detrimental. Otherwise, they would recommend not running critical hit unless it is one of these builds. One Pokemon that you could definitely run critical hit on, unsurprisingly, is Absol. Absol, of course, is based around critical hit. Its moves critically hit, so obviously having more critical hit gives you a lot of opportunities to do more damage. You still, at the same time, can take our assassin-looking build from earlier and do very, very well with it if you don't have enough critical hit emblems. And that's another thing that's kind of tough. You need a lot of gold emblems to really make critical hit work. Another interesting Pokemon that works well with critical hit is Garchomp. If you're running a scope lens, Garchomp is very, very good with critical hit. It already has a pretty high critical hit naturally, and the interesting thing is when Garchomp hits with its boosted attacks, you get multiple opportunities to critical hit. This is different from a lot of Pokemon where they don't actually have this. So because you have multiple opportunities to critically hit, giving yourself more crit percentage will hopefully let you land a crit, and because you're running scope lens, let you get an extra little pop of damage from scope lens's passive. Garchomp is a cool Pokemon to run crit on, and I personally love it. I always run crit on Garchomp. The next is Aegislash, specifically Shadow Claw Aegislash. Shadow Claw Iron Head, I believe, Aegislash. So the idea here is that is the build that gives you the extra critical hit chance on Aegislash. So with the extra critical hit chance and the extra critical hit percentage that you're getting here, you're able to do these massively powerful boosted attacks with Aegislash once you hit that level 11. Also, Iron Head can critically hit after you throw your Shadow Claw. So there's just a lot of options there for extra crit damage. Of course, a setup that would work well is critical hit Crustle. Crustle can critically hit with its X Scissor, and if you're running a critical hit build, you need a ton of crit. You want a ton of crit, and when they land, ooh boy, crit Crustle. One of my absolute favorite things to play. Their final recommendation for critical hit is Flash Cannon Duraludon. Given that Flash Cannon Duraludon doesn't actually benefit at all from any attack speed or anything like that, because Flash Cannon is essentially just the same amount of attack speed over and over. I've heard you can slightly boost it. I could be wrong about that. The point is, they're saying that's actually an area that you could have some critical hit benefits on, is that build with Duraludon. There isn't currently any other Pokemon that the Math Cord recommends running critical hit emblems on. I still think personally that they're pretty dang good. You could throw them on auto attackers and things like that and get some good value out of them, but the math geniuses have spoken, and the math says it is better to not run critically hit. Critically hit? Oh, come on, Jake. On some of those Pokemon. So you don't need it as much on your Cinderace. You don't need it as much on your Decidueye. Run the other build that they have recommended. Before I go, I want to talk about a few emblem setups that did not make it into this video and are not recommended by the Math Cord that people from time to time run, and I can give you an idea of maybe why they are not recommended. A build that I've been messing around with lately is on Wednesdays we wear pink, and that is a 7 pink, 4 white, 2 blue, 2 purple setup. The fact of the matter is, it's really hard to know how much this hindrance resistance is actually helping you. There is a ton of crowd control in the game right now, and I've run this and I think it's pretty fun on Pokemon like Wigglytuff and stuff like that, but it absolutely feels like I'm probably making a mistake and I could just run something like our special HP tank and do a lot better. Another build is one I wanted to show here that I call Lil Gentleman. This build is a 5 black, 2 purple, 2 white, 2 brown weird monstrosity that I have been running on Sableye. I can't say that this is recommended anywhere, but it gives a lot of base movement speed. Pairing that with a float stone and an experience share, my thought process is, and I've seen other players run this, is that the idea is you can get in with Sableye and then get out fast enough to become invisible again a little quicker than you could normally, and then jump back in. It's very possible that this is all in my head. You'll notice that there was no setup recommended for yellow. Right now it just feels like you could get the same benefit using a float stone, so why wouldn't you use a float stone and have a better emblem page? Then as far as defense and special defense specific builds go, really again the idea is defenses are not super great in Pokemon Unite. They're just not set up well for taking the other type of damage, or they're not set up well for taking true damage, and they don't give you enough benefits to other areas. Perhaps if we get some buffs to defense emblems at some point, this could be different, but right now they're just not recommended. And finally, a quick conversation about red emblems and navy emblems. Red emblems are very, very weird. Okay, the way attack speed works in Pokemon Unite is an absolute disaster, so I'm sure you've seen multiple videos I've made about it. Just know that having 3 red or something like that, it seems to almost provide 0 benefit to any Pokemon. Only use the red emblems that are recommended in this video, period. You are just wasting your emblem slots. Now onto navy emblems. Right now there are only 3 navy emblems in the game, so you are only able to get a 1% change to your Unite move gauge charge time. Basically, you have to have your Unite move down, and then even once it's down, we have a 1% difference. We just can't really see anything with it yet. Perhaps when they get to 7 navy, there will be some cool builds that kind of pop up around that, but currently there's really no reason to have 3 navy inside of one of your emblem setups. So there you have it, the best boost emblems for every Pokemon inside of Pokemon Unite. I hope this has been entertaining and informative. I hope it's been infotainment for you, and I hope you learned a few things as we went. We missed it a few, but we busted a few myths, and we provided the best emblem setups we could, verified by the Unite Math Cord, the fine folks over at Unite DB. Huge shout out to them. Thank you so much for all of this. I'm sure more emblems will come at some point, and we'll do this whole thing over again. We'll have an addendum or a update. Wouldn't be an addendum. Boy, I don't know words. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I hope this was helpful. Love you all, and I'll see you soon. We're gonna do this whole thing with items. It's time to do this with items too. Mwah.